Let's do this.
It's time for Hanging with Langan.
I like that she's got a big dirty mouth that gets her in trouble.
Wow.
Stop me, 'cause I'm having a good time.
Hello, you guys. How are you? Welcome to Hanging with Langan. I'm Maureen Langan, and this is where I interview cool people. Cool people from academics, like Peter Bales, the professor. No Marianne, but we will get a Marianne, to alcoholics, also known as comics usually. But the show, it's fun, it's hard, it's smart. That's the goal all the time, where I bring my journalism background and hopefully the wit of the comic. And, you know, it runs the gamut here. So I like interviewing the people that we bring onto the show. And by we, I mean me. Next week, so excited, same bat time, same bat channel. Sandra Joseph will be joining me. Who's Sandra Joseph? You know who she is. She is a Broadway star. She played Christine in Phantom of the Opera. She has the title of being the longest running leading lady in the longest running show on Broadway. I can't believe I know her. She's the most down-to-earth yet talented woman. And I will tell you the story of how I met her when you tune in next week. I was so embarrassed, but you know, what are we going to do? So listen to me. You can get Hanging with Langan at maureenlangan.com. All the episodes are there, or, you know, hangingwithlangan.com takes you to the same place, or wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. And if you want to see all the video chats, like what I do here, we put all of those up on patreon.com/Maureen Langan. And I'll show you the link to that so you can see it, because I don't want anybody confused here. And so it's patreon.com/Maureen Langan. And when you subscribe there, you'll get like delicious backstage chats, I am telling you, with like comic Jessica Curson and NPR's Ophira Eisenberg, who hosts Ask Me Another or Ask Me Anything or Tell Me Something. She, oh my God, what she told me backstage, I can't. The Irish Catholic girl in me was like, what? You must have a liberal mother. So I couldn't even have Barbie dolls because they had boobs. I don't want you playing with a doll with them boobs. Serious, double dog swear. And then Jessica Curson told me how she was treated on The View and another show that she was a warm-up comic for, and she walked off. And I'm going to tell you what show that was. When you subscribe at Patreon, Maureen Langan, and at the $25 level, you can get a Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt and button. It's over one of my shoulders. It's spatially hard to show you that. There it is. Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt when you subscribe at Patreon. Or if you just want the t-shirt and you don't want to subscribe, go to my website, Maureen Langan, and feel free here on Hanging with Langan to send me your comments as you're watching this, any questions that you have, or email me. And if you want me to, you have a guest suggestion, or you just want me to answer some of your questions on air, we'll do that too. So in just a moment coming up, Peter Bales, the official historian of Hanging with Langan. I love that. He's like the Katie Porter of my world. He brings his, not chalkboard, the whiteboard, and the most amazing comic extraordinaire, my beloved Keith Price, who I've worked with a ton of times. I just adore him. But first, you know, we're going to talk about, with Peter and Keith, we're going to talk Black history. This is Black History Month. We've addressed topics like this in the past. It doesn't have to just be Black History Month, but we want to pay homage to some of the real issues in which Black Americans have had to endure, the history, where things have changed, where they've grown, where we've stepped back in time. And one of the things that interests me is, this is the corny journalist in me. One of the things that really interests me is when Blacks first came to America, before they were enslaved, or early on when some were enslaved and some weren't, what that was like. And we're going to talk about that and move on to Reconstruction and a lot of interesting topics. But could I please, would you indulge me? I'm fascinated by women in early America, particularly Black women. So I have read, and I just reread, well, I'm rereading America's Women by Gail Collins. This is like, I feel like I'm the teacher. Peter, give me your whiteboard. So yeah, we should be having the blackboard, not a whiteboard, in Black History Month. Anyway, So this is about Black women in we're talking the late 17th century, so the late 1600s. All right, ready for this? African American women who weren't bound by the same social constraints as white women frequently set up their own businesses, running boarding houses, hair salons, or restaurants. And catering was a big business for them as well. I mean, these are like the first entrepreneurs in America. In Charleston, South Carolina, Black women took over the local market. They sold vegetables and chickens and other produce that they acquired from the growing population of slaves. So they got the product from the slaves and then they sold them. And the slaves had, little small plots beside their cabins. So the city came to depend on the women for their supply of fresh food. And white people complained about the power and independence of the trading women. They were mad at the Black women. So in 1686, South Carolina passed a law prohibiting the purchase of goods from slaves, but it had little effect. About a half a century later, Charleston officials were still complaining about the exorbitant price that Black women charged for many articles necessary for the support of the inhabitants. It's like, how the landlords keep raising your rates? They were mad at Black women for charging them too much for their goods, talking about flipping it back then. The clerk of the market claimed that the insolent and abusive manner, that's a quote, of the slave woman made him afraid to say or do anything. And one petition in 1747 said that because of the market, white people are entirely ruined and rendered miserable. And that's a quote from, I guess, somebody's letters of the day. So I just find that very interesting that that's what was happening. And then, of course, they ain't got time for that. So they have to then go enslave and take this all away from the Black women. So anyway, joining me, I want to talk more about Black history, is the official professor of Hanging with Langan, our own Professor Peter Bales. Welcome, Peter.
Here.
I did my homework, you know that.
Well, no, wait. You assigned homework. You're the only podcast host I know who assigns homework, and I did my homework. I got the whiteboard covered with stuff.
Oh, God.
I'm ready.
All right. And we're going to bring in the wonderful, the gifted, the talented comedian, Keith Price. Hello, honey.
Hello, darlings. How are you all?
We're good. We're good.
How are you?
That's good to be here.
Hey, I want to say to people, if you're watching this live right now, please share this. Start a watch party. This is how we grow the audience, and this is how we get people to know about what we're doing here on Hanging with Langan. And if you're watching it on the Hanging with Langan Facebook group page, make sure that we'd love to see your name with your comments. You can still comment, but we'd love to see your name. So all you simply have to do is go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and just click on a blue button, StreamYard.com/Facebook, and it's all there for you. So keep your comments coming. We love them. All right. I want to start this out, Peter. I talked about the independence of the Black woman. That trait still seems to...
Power to the sister.
But it seems to be quite the trait that still holds true stereotypically today, don't you think?
Well, I think it's very interesting. First, Keith,
Yes, sir.
I free associated on the board. Maureen gave me some ideas, but I free associated things about Black history on the board. And as I was writing on the board, I knew you were going to be on the show, and I was thinking my list would be totally different than your list because you have lived it. Okay, and
Well,
I certainly...
It only depends on how far back you've gone.
Well, you didn't live in the 1600s, and that's what Maureen is starting out with.
I know.
But,
But sadly, we're still feeling the sting of the 1600s.
well, you know what? I was right. Keith, I was thinking about you when I was writing this list. I've never been followed around in a store because they think I'm going to steal something. Has that happened to you?
Yes, it has.
All right. Well, I've got the historical point of view, and you've lived it. I just want to acknowledge that, and I also want to acknowledge that, somewhat to my chagrin.
Chagrin. Good word. Chagrin.
Great word.
Chagrin. There is no white Anglo-Saxon Protestant month. History Month.
It has to be rough. It's only the other 10 months of the year. That's all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess the whole year is White Anglo-Saxon Protestant History Month.
You think?
Pretty much.
But,
Even during this period, it's still white Anglo-Saxon period history. That's what we got going on.
All right.
Anybody watching what's happening, in Congress today? You see any people of color? I saw one. Any women?
That dramatic impeachment manager, the African-American guy,
Yeah, he was good.
Colorado, was profound. What's his name?
Representative Negus.
Nagoose. I didn't know how to say his last name.
Nagoose. Remember that name because I think he's going places. He's already in Congress, but that was outstanding.
So let's talk about. I want to move from the women of the late 1600s, but it sounds like
I kind of avoid. I never even answered that.
Well, we're talking about going from a time when many were not enslaved yet. It was a new country.
Yes. I wrote on the board 1670. There were only a few thousand slaves in the colonies. By 1750, there are 400,000. And of course, in the 1800s, millions and millions. By the time you get to the Civil War, approximately 3.5 million out of the 9 million population of the South was slaves. Mm-hmm. So it's a constantly growing thing. Now, slaves, Maureen, what you're talking about, African Americans were not immediately made slaves when they arrived in the 1600s because as the plantations developed, they used indentured servants. Remember that from school?
Yes.
Most people got out of jail in England and were, because the plantation owner would pay their passage, they'd 5 to 7 years essentially be a slave. And then they would be set free after that. And as the
hence
grew,
the difference from actual slavery. I was going to say, hence the difference from actual slavery.
That's why indentured servants are different from actual slaves. Being a slave was a lifetime sentence. Indentured servants had 5 to 7 years. And eventually there were not enough indentured servants as tobacco really, really took off. Right. And that is when they turned to African-American slavery. Mm. And you can trace it all to money and greed.
Always can.
Yeah.
Follow the money.
Slavery really took off as you go into the 1700s and these giant plantations in the South. The most I've ever heard, on one plantation is about 450 slaves.
Professor?
So in the back. Well,
I would be in the back doing wisecracks and chewing gum, but I would be very interested nonetheless. So if you had this free Black population, at the birth of America, and women making a living and men having a plot of land, how did someone overtake them? Were they able to fight back, or were those people continued to be free and they only brought on new slaves? Like if somebody came to my house and said, okay, we're taking you away and you're doing this, we'd be like, what?
Can I answer?
Yes, please, Keith.
You have to remember that the particular period of time that you're talking about was during what we look at now as that white patriarchal male society. And so if you were not a white male, certainly not a wealthy white male, you have no say in any decision-making processes that ultimately become to your life. Because once you're married to someone, you're his property as a woman. Once you are a slave, you are their property. And so when you're considered and looked at as property, no one looks at the idea that you own a house. Nobody looks at you and decides that you own anything because you're property and you own nothing.
Absolutely right. Absolutely 100% right. African-American slaves did not have any weapons. The whites had all the weapons, all the organization, all the power. And that's what we need to understand.
Before we move on, Professor,
yes.
When you say indentured servants, I of course know what that is, but there was this whole thing going on in America, which was a fallacy that the Irish were slaves. People were putting that out in recent years to kind of almost offset the experiences of Black Americans. And I thought that was interesting because Irish, to the best of my knowledge, were never slaves in America. They were indentured servants and they paid their way here, unless you know otherwise.
Well, what I know is that the Irish started to come to this country in great numbers in the 1830s and 40s. They were Catholic. They were not considered white.
Oh, they're the whitest people other than the Swedes.
I know. Believe me, they should not go to the beach. But the fact is the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who were here and established did not consider the Catholic Irish to be equals. And Keith will tell you this, the horrible N-word was used equally in New York City for African Americans and Irish in much of the 19th century.
Yeah.
Signs all over the place. Irish did not apply.
They called it Irish the N-word?
Yes, without a doubt. Absolutely.
Wow.
You know, but again, that's the the thing that people don't get. It's like all of the folks that are here in America, these white folks that are having their attitudes and carrying on, that come from different places in terms of their genealogy. It's like when they realize that if you came to this country as an immigrant, regardless of what country you came from, you were already looked at as a second and third class citizen. Now you throw being black on top of that, then we get pushed below the whatever the strata is for the immigrants. We're going to be even below that, and don't let us be immigrants from black immigrants from other countries, because then it's even an extra layer of crazy. So it is it's interesting to me to watch how white people behave now, and they don't even recognize what their own history is. When they talk about their Irish grandparents coming over, or their Italian so-and-sos coming over, and, not recognizing that their families that got here were not treated well either, and then for them to be generations later not treating people well either is almost disgusting.
Maureen Langan here. I also, Professor, we'll get back to you. One of my friends, a white gal, we have a mutual friend who is African American, mixed race, and my white friend is always saying, "Oh God, she sees everything through race. Everything about it's race, always race." This was a while ago, and I said, "Well, you have to understand that if somebody's an ass to us, we're like, that person's such a jerk." But she doesn't know if that person's a jerk in general or a jerk to her because she's black. Like, she doesn't have that other layer. She has that other layer to have to sort out. Would you agree with that, Thomas?
Well, I would say the reason is because we don't have the luxury of being able to look at it as a different situation other than. Because more than likely, yes, it's like you and I are in the same room together and someone says something about me or to me about who I am. It's like I still have to deal with that from wherever it comes from. It's like you don't like, and then I have to also add the additional LGBT extra factor. I also have
a lot going on.
I got too much going on. A lot of baggage. First generation American. My parents are immigrants. When that, I'm saying, like, I'm a hodgepodge of madness. And so, and so because of that, when I met,
that's the title of your first novel. Hodgepodge of madness.
I'm with you.
Remember that phrase, because it's a keeper.
It's
a hodgepodge of madness.
And so, but like, you don't have that luxury to look at things differently because the way you're treated by this world, because that you're black or Latino or whatever, or as a woman, like, you don't have the luxury to fight back from that because it's already an attack that you have to deal with. Whereas as a white man, you don't. Like I've written about this before, and I've said, people don't understand something as simple as this. The decision to put on a hoodie for me, a regular hoodie, simple hoodie, I have to think about where I'm going. Why am I putting on the hoodie? Is it because I'm just, casually chilling, or I just want something to throw over later? I have to actually make a plan, because God forbid I'm walking through the streets of New York City, on the Upper West Side, where I had gotten stopped once by a cop for walking dogs. But like, to be in a space like that and then have them stop and attack me just because, like, I have to think about that. But you, Maureen, you don't have to worry about what happens when you put a hoodie on.
I don't, but I do have to worry as a woman, always over my shoulder. Where am I? Is it dark? I'm running.
Right.
There are things that a guy would never worry about running in Central Park on a path alone at a certain time. I mean, maybe later at night. I'm always aware always on the subway, who's getting on, who's getting off. Women always have to worry about that.
Right.
Another topic I wanted to get into with the great professor at the Katie Porter of Hank Langan.
Oh,
I think
me.
a topic that really interests me, Peter. I know there's so much to talk about this. Oh,
I love all this stuff.
to Rosa Parks, my doll. I have a Rosa Parks doll that a friend sent me. That's right, Rosa.
Beautiful.
I know.
Rosa Parks is on my list here.
I see her.
She's a Barbie, though. She's a Barbie. I don't like her being a Barbie, but she doesn't. Her boobs aren't like really hanging out or anything. But that's what I wanted to ask you, Peter. We'll get to.
Do they have Frederick Douglass as a Ken doll?
Do they really? They could. Well, they could if they have Rosa as a Barbie. They
know.
might.
Well, they should have. Frederick Douglass is on my list too. You know who I forgot to write it down, but I'll just tell you, Jackie Robinson. When I think Rosa Parks, I think Jackie Robinson. I think African American pioneers who did things for the first time.
Yeah.
Rosa Parks is an American hero. So is Jackie Robinson. So are a lot of African Americans, and we have to remember them because this goes for everybody. We have to know our history.
Right.
What about the $20 bill, Maureen, that has Andrew Jackson? You probably have at least 120 in your purse. I know things are tough.
Well, not since March. That's coming in big, but yeah.
But down here, I have Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad on the list. She's going on the $20
bill.
Justifiably so. She was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. They didn't take Easy Pass.
But what was the reluctance prior to this to putting her on the 20? Because this has been some controversy.
She's a black woman. That's the controversy. She's a black woman.
Part of the reluctance was they already had somebody on the $20 bill, and America's not in the habit of taking people off their money. Although the way we look at Andrew Jackson now, as opposed to when he was president, is completely different. His Indian removal policy is genocidal. And at the time, back in the 1830s, it made him more popular in America. And today we look at it, the Trail of Tears, and we go, oh my God, what did you do? Why did you do that? Times change, sensibilities change. We're not going to forget Andrew Jackson. He's a part of our history. But honoring Harriet Tubman on the 20 is the right thing to do.
Oh, I would love that. What a brave woman. If the movie is anything like the experiences that she really had, which it must be, I just cannot. I really believe that she had to be one of the bravest people that ever lived in America. Not only for the railroad, but didn't she head up like a little militia, as if like that's not a big deal. Did she have a little army going on over?
Yeah,
like,
she was,
like a side hustle.
She was an anti-slavery activist in many ways. Yes, they didn't use the term side hustle back then.
No, okay. I think it's called being an abolitionist, but okay, yes. I'll work with that. I like side hustle.
Harriet Tubman. Let's give a woman, an African-American woman named Sojourner Truth,
another person,
coverage. She eloquently used the Bible. Back in those days, there's no radio or TV. People went to lectures at night and meetings. And she was very powerful using religion to counter the idea of slavery. Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Frederick Douglass is probably the greatest African-American abolitionist in American history. There are a lot of great ones, but I would say.
Well, let's talk about. I want to talk. There's so many topics here, and I think we'll have to come back and talk even more about this on another day this month, or any month. But we're talking about these very strong people like Frederick Douglass, these women who fought for rights. The voting rights, the suffragettes, they were working, the Black women are always the one, look, they're the ones who got Biden in now, the Black community, the women. These women worked so hard for women to have the right to vote, and yet they were left on the sidelines when the line in the sand was drawn, meaning, will we ever get the right to vote? If we bring Black women along, we may lose that chance. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Keith, you want to go first?
Because I'm just going to answer it from the place of just shady American history. Absolutely. That was exactly the point. And ultimately, in the end, it's like, the choice then is, yeah, we're going to get the right to vote because we are white women and this is what we're fighting for.
Yeah.
And thank you for you Black ladies for doing all that work for us and carrying, posters and doing some of the signage and, being there when we needed you to basically be our mammies as we walk through this process. And then when the time comes to when the rights are ready to be given, those are the people that get left out first. Because
Absolutely.
again, the idea is it important to say that women get the right to vote, period, and then we'll figure out the details later of which women will get it first, kind of like the vaccine,
Yeah, the white suffragettes that are so famous and did such a great job getting women the right to vote with the 19th Amendment in 1920, that's on the quiz, did neglect and actually desert African-American women who had fought with them. As
Susan B. Anthony. I'm looking at you, Susan B. Anthony.
Katie Stanton, you are Lucretia Mott. You are absolutely right. That's
got my good eye on history. Just saying.
Let's repeat that because that got lost a little bit. Repeat that. Between Susan B. Anthony and Lucretia Mott, what was the point?
Well, the point was that these famous suffragettes, as great as they were getting the vote for white women, deserted African-American women in the quest and literally deserted them. Yes.
But there was infighting amongst the white women about whether they should go there. So was Elizabeth Cady Stanton keeping the Black women in the movement? Some major women were and some were not, with the thinking that if we don't, it's like Ireland. We have to take as many counties as we can get and we'll work on the other 6 down the line. It's like, let's get what we can get now, because if we bring Black women along, we may not get anything. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just reiterating what I believe is the thinking.
But usually within all of these concepts, there's always somebody within the mix that always gets left behind. Like even if you look at today's like modern LGBTQ movement, one of the big arguments always has been is that we have been very negative in handling our trans community as making it a part of the big community. And so, so that's now the concerted effort amongst many people, including myself, to try and make sure that you are very inclusive to actual trans people. Because, when we saw all of the legislation happening for gay marriage and everything that was going on, trans people were completely left out of that conversation. And now that we have somewhat solidified those rights for all of us, it's incumbent upon us in the LGBT or LGB community to grab our T's and bring them and pull them into the mix and into the fold and protect them the way that we expect ourselves to be protected. So
before we move on, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. A little announcement mid-show. This is what we do. You're hanging with Langan, always fun, heart, and smart. Cool people, from academics to alcoholics. That's what we do here. I want to make an announcement that next Tuesday on this show, Sandra Joseph, this is at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, it'll be up on Hanging with Langan, the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, on my homepage, MaureenLangan.com. Sandra Joseph, she played Christine in Phantom of the Opera for 10 years, the longest running leading lady in the longest running Broadway show. She's joining me. I feel so honored. When I tell you how I met her, I'm so embarrassed, but that's me. The most down-to-earth woman. You're going to love her. She has such a message for people. You're going to love that. And also, too, I want to encourage people, if you're liking the shows, subscribe, of course, to the audio, but we also have the video chats like we have here, and you can have all of those plus backstage chats, which I have to get the two of you one day to do a backstage chat with me. And what you'll get there is bonus clips that you won't get here, like comic Jessica Kirsten telling me how she was treated on The View, who was the worst to her, another show that she walked off of, who made her the host of that show. She was like, I've had it with that one. You only get that in the bonus shows at patreon.com. And I'll show you a link to that. Patreon.com. That's patreon.com. Maureen Langan. And if you patreon.com, and if you sign at the $25 level, I'll give you the Don't Make Me Hate You t-shirt and button. I know, I love it. And if you look, if you don't want to sign up at monthly, sign up for 1 month, or just go to MaureenLangan.com and you can just get the t-shirt for its, on its own. And you can also support the show at PayPal and Venmo at Mo Langan, because we keep these shows going and this is what we do. This is the new world. And you can support Keith at Twitter and Venmo at Comedy Daddy. And Peter Bales, I don't know how you support him. Just keep tuning in, Peter. What do we do?
Check me out on Facebook. All right. And check out a new group I have on Facebook called Bitchin' Baby Boomers.
I love it. Bitchin' baby boom. Here you
I am proud to be a bitchin' baby boomer because I'm going to give you my honest age. I was born in 1954, and Keith will tell you,
Really?
1954, Brown versus Board of Education, Kansas.
Let's give a shout out though to some people watching. Is that okay? And
Okay.
we'll get back
I got carried away.
I know, but I love when you get carried away. It's fun. Hey, shout out to, my lovely sister, Annie Banani, a teacher. John LaRocque, a Long Island comic. We love you, John. Elizabeth, I don't know how to say your last name. Batapidi. Thank you for watching. Danny Cohen, he believes in love and he believes in us.
Hey, Danny.
So thank you guys for watching. Keep watching Hanging with Langan, start a watch party, and share. Tony, he's talking about ice cream. Very good. Back to Professor Peter Bales, Black History Month, my Rosa Parks doll. Take it away.
Well, we're jumping all over the place, but, Keith, your point about the trans community being left behind, I think it's very valid. I think it relates to the racial issues we're talking about. I think it's very, very important. We don't want to live in an America where we are, totally cool about gays, but somehow trans are not included. And I think that's the point. I think it's very, very, very well taken. And I think the historical comparison holds up. Remember, African-American men got the right to vote before white women did. White women did.
Dates, give me dates. Dates of when the black man and when the black woman got the right to vote.
Well,
it's the 14th Amendment, right? Or 13th?
Actually, the 15th Amendment gave African Americans the right to vote after the Civil War. The 14th Amendment was equal treatment under the law, which should have covered voting. But just to make doubly sure for African American men being allowed to vote, they passed the 15th Amendment, giving them the right to vote. The 13th Amendment, of course, freed the slaves. The 14th Amendment, which is so important today, equal treatment under the law, and the 15th Amendment, the vote for African-American men.
Well, what year was that roughly? The 50s?
66, 60, around there.
1865.
Oh, like what? Oh, yeah, like what?
I mean, it was quick.
And then when did black women get the right to vote? Do we know?
1965, 64, really.
1973.
Okay, officially on the books, all women got the right to vote with the 19th Amendment in 1920.
Right.
Keith is absolutely right, especially in the South, but in other places as well. African Americans, men and women, had difficulty. It was near impossible in a lot of places until the 1965 Voting Rights Act. You had to
explain that to people who don't know. We hear a lot about the Voting Rights Act, but tell people what that means, what it did, and then recently something was undone with that or changed. So I want you to give us a quick wrap up of that.
Keith, I'll do it. Okay.
I thought you were talking to you. I was just.
Keith, you start.
It authorized the federal government. Keith, let's handle this. Let's just keep.
I had allergies.
Keith, we can handle this together. It authorized the federal government to enforce voting rights anywhere, especially they were aiming at the American South. Because before the Voting Rights Act, there were local laws and state laws, especially in the South, that would prevent African Americans from voting. Remember the poll tax?
The poll tax, literacy tax.
The literacy test.
All of that.
In the decades after the Civil War, the grandfather clause, if your grandfather was a slave, then you couldn't vote. The whites-only primary.
I didn't know that one. I didn't know. I knew the others. I had no idea that if your grandfather had been a slave, you could not vote.
Right.
Yeah, that worked for decades.
Right.
Because everybody's in the South, everybody's grandfather was the whites-only primary. You couldn't run if you were black, or you couldn't vote if you were black. And today, we talk about gerrymandering. And let's be honest, both parties do it when they're in state power. You draw the districts so your party outnumbers the other party. The Republicans are doing that like crazy because they outnumber the Democrats in state houses right now. But the original gerrymandering that we're talking about is
way back then.
racial gerrymandering. It's called racial gerrymandering. They drew every district in the South so whites outnumbered blacks, and you're never going to get a black person elected that way. And way in the back, Keith.
Yes. Well, I would like to also add in this conversation about the thing, because I'm looking right behind you and I see over your shoulder Jim Crow laws. Now, all of those things are the reason why we've had things such as the runoff elections that we have in Georgia, where it's like the 50% majority. That came from the post-Reconstruction Jim Crow law area, because once the South was open at first, Black people were actually being able to vote for themselves, were electing people to go to Congress. And what happened was they tried to figure out a way to keep them from coming. So once someone was in a district or in a state, like let's say Georgia, they came up with this whole rule now where, you know, you got to get a certain amount of percentages of the vote to be on the runoff ballot at some other point in time. And then once you're on that ballot, you have to have 51% or you don't win. And so, like, they found a way to streamline it, because, again, once you have a white person and a black person on the same thing, which is what I was very worried about with Warnock and Ossoff on the thing, is that once you, in a place like Georgia, where you have white people that will only vote for white people just because they're white.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you have the white folks who are cool enough to vote for black folks. But then you look at the choices that you have in Georgia, and it's like, don't forget that there's anti-Semitism as well as racism. So there's a whole sector of people that wouldn't vote for Ossoff just because of that.
I got to tell you, I was surprised. I did not think both of them would win, because the exact reasons you just brought up, black and Jewish. But Keith, I want to, my guess, if you're just tuning in now, the official historian of Hanging with Langan, Professor Peter Bales, and my beloved comedian friend, Keith Price. You know, to Keith's point, though.
I'm not beloved. I should be
beloved. Pretty official, though. How can you be more beloved than official?
Beloved than official.
But you know what's interesting? You're talking about, you hear recently, the first black man in the Senate. That's not true. Let's go back to Reconstruction and Congress. After the Civil War, my understanding, and you would know better than me, Professor, is that there were a number of black men in Congress, and that scared the crap out of the white establishment. Take it away.
Exactly.
All right, but raise your hand and I'll, or strangle me through the screen to get me to stop. Now, during Reconstruction, after the Civil War, there were blue troops in the South. There was the Freedmen's Bureau. They were enforcing rights for African Americans, and African Americans could ever so briefly vote.
And you don't say what blue troops are. Nobody knows what blue troops are.
The Union
the good guys.
Okay, got you. Sorry. Brain fart.
Not the gray guys. They lost. The blue guys.
Okay.
With the yellow trim, Keith, as you know. It really worked well together.
Okay. I didn't get the clothing reference.
I love good piping.
So, yes, 2 African Americans were elected to the Senate. The first one, Hiram Revels. I looked that up before this show because I had homework from the host. And I think a number of congressmen, numbering in the teens, were actually elected. But that slammed shut. That opportunity slammed shut after the contested election of 1876. And in the so-called Compromise of 1877, the Democrats gave up the presidency because Governor Tilden of New York had legitimately won, and gave the presidency to Ohio Governor Rutherford B. Hayes. In exchange, the Southern Democrats got the blue troops out of the South. Freedmen's Bureaus closed down by this time. White Southerners take control of their state and local governments. They put together a segregated society by using Jim Crow laws. They prevent African Americans from voting, and you get the segregated South for the next over 100 years.
That's right.
That was the controversial election of 1876.
Wow.
The guy who won, Samuel Tilden of New York, is not up on the wall of your 5th grade classroom.
That's
Rutherford B. Hayes is up on the wall.
Did he have to concede in order? Like, how did that come about?
Tilden should have fought harder, and that's still a question the historians wonder why he didn't fight harder, because he was clearly ripped off. Rutherford B. Hayes, to calm everybody down, said, I'm only going to serve 1 term, but he still had a nickname, his fraudulency. That was his nickname when he was president. Ruthie.
Well, we have that name now. Okay. Wow. History
And-
does repeat. History repeats.
By the way,
Let
last
me ask you this, Professor.
Okay, go
If
ahead.
there was such a large number of congressmen who were Black, do they not have enough power to?
No, there's only about 11. I think there's only about 11 or 12.
No.
The teens. They didn't have enough power. No.
And then when you add the fact that they were already working the angles of voter suppression to keep any of that out. And like you said, once they got rid of the Freedmen's Bureau, once they got rid of any quote unquote oversight to maintain the fact that they were, going to follow the letter of the law, that's when they just decided to create their own laws. And again, you have to go out of your way to be that extra evil. And that's the part that I think that's the piece of history that this current white America that's all white, awoke and ready to get out there and feel angry. It's like the part that they have to deal with is they've got to reconcile with the actual evilness of what that past has brought us. Like if you stop and think that all they had to do was just let people live their lives. That's all.
Keith,
you're Black over there, you're Black over there, you're Latin over there, you're Asian over there. Live your lives. We're going to see you for mahjong at some other
Get out of
part.
my ass crack. Exactly.
Keith, I'm so glad you used the term evil and evilness.
Yeah.
And I've tried to think for years, what causes racism? And is evil a word maybe in the Bible or written down, or is there a physical evil that you can see and touch? When it comes to racism, the answer may be yes. I think that poor whites desperately psychologically need to say, my life is bad, my life is horrible, I really have no future, but at least I'm not Black.
As bad as Black. Yeah.
Or blame the Black.
Of
Or blame
racism.
the minorities for their lot in life.
Right.
And again, those are the same people, like if you get all historic and weird, at that particular point in time, especially when they were spewing their hatred, are the same people that don't realize that it's because of all of these Black people that you basically enslaved that you even have a freaking economy. The reason that you have nothing, your plantations are fabulous, but not one of you bitches hammered a nail out there. Not one of you all in your family took the time to get out there and mow a lawn or plow a field. Not one of you.
Plantation owners, in their defense, do you know how hard it is to make a really good mint julep?
It is evil. And two things I wanted to say. One is I had a friend who was very resistant to the idea that racism is part of our DNA. And she's like, well, I'm not racist. I go, no. Our country, the DNA, what flowed through the beginnings of our country to present day racism is part of the fabric woven into the American experience. The other thing is when I watch, I can't even bear it. I went down to something called the Whitney Plantation outside of New Orleans, and I'm going to have one of the women who work there on the show with me. But when you just we see it in images all the time of babies, children being ripped from their mothers. I want to vomit. And we're still doing it in America. And I cannot believe anything more evil than taking somebody that just came from a mother's womb and grabbing it and taking it away. Cannot.
Yes. And again, and when you say that it's happening again, upon whose direction is that happening? An asshole, evil white man. So that means that we have just come right back to where we started 100 and something, 400 years ago, where we were watching people steal children. That's why I get so angry when I look at that, because it's like, how do we as a country figure out how we're going to, because again, this is something else that we're going to have to reconcile with. It's like, you have stolen people's children.
But they'll say Obama did that too. I'm just saying that.
I don't care who did it. I don't care at this point.
It's wrong, whoever does it.
It's if he started it with Obama, it certainly got exacerbated to the hilt during Trump. And so that is something that we need to still, as a country, that's part, talking about healing our soul. That's going to be something that our soul is going to have to pay for too, because you cannot do that to other human beings. And this is what I'm talking about, the insidiousness and the evilness of slavery and the evilness of white people unlike yourselves. and the historical energy that has still carried over. It's like you cannot have a conversation about any of this until you own the fact that this shit is evil and effed up. And yes, you specifically didn't do it, but your ancestry, the line of your ancestry is responsible for it, and you're still benefiting from all of the work of that particular that kind of hatred, and not recognizing that that's based out of some sort of horrible inequality, and you're willing to stand on the side and be like, oh, I'm sorry the blacks are having a hard time.
Great, Keith. Keith just had a visceral reaction, and I think of the history as evil as slavery was and is. Probably even the accounts of the time, the most evil part of slavery was the slave auctions, when families were separated, when babies were taken away from mothers. And I got to tell you, Maureen, a lot of times when they would catch an escaped slave in the South, that slave would be heading south. Why are you heading south? I'm trying to find my wife and my kids.
Mm-hmm.
They were heading south
to find their family.
That image, the slave auctions,
can't even
bear horrible.
When people say, "Oh, Maureen, what are you, a bleeding heart?" Whose heart? Everybody's heart should bleed when they hear this. If your heart doesn't bleed, you're dead. Your soul's dead.
Well, and again, it is about our humanity, like
the lack thereof,
or the lack of humanity. But the thing is that we have to get some way of getting back to actually being humane to each other, because we're not humane to each other. It's like the concept of slavery. Stop. You're going to take a person and take them from their homeland, take them from wherever, bring them someplace and make them work for you for free because you think that you are a better human being on the planet than that person that's in front of you.
And you're entitled to it.
And you're entitled to that. And that's what's evil, and that's what's insidious. So like you have to kind of go back to that and undo the rip the strand apart that stuff is based on. And until people are willing to own it and willing to at least own not only that it's messed up, but actually own the fact that what the results of what we're seeing today is a direct result of that. Until we have that conversation, we're going to keep having people with their fucking tiki torches every day. That's what we're going to keep having.
We got about 5 more minutes, and I hope, because I want to chat more, and I hope, would you guys come back in a couple weeks and we can continue the conversation, because there's so much to talk about. So Peter, all right, I want you to take it away because you have so much you wanted to talk about.
There's so much more on the board. I'm like,
no, don't worry about it. I was just free associating. What good is on the board? I'll tell you something good that's on the board.
Yeah, please.
Harlem Renaissance. By Harlem Renaissance. That's when the Cotton Club was doing its thing. That's right. When Hughes and other African American authors and musicians, was doing its thing.
Laura Neale Hurston's, was it William Weldon Johnson? I mean, there's a whole lot of really great people that came out of that period.
That really energized African Americans in this country. And I'll tell you something, African Americans, when they could vote, which was rarely, after the Civil War, voted Republican because Lincoln was a Republican and the Republicans freed the slaves. But after the Civil War, he did anything for African Americans. Republicans,
not a damn thing.
Not until
the way Pete says it, not a damn thing.
Not a damn thing, but heartache and pain.
But the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt reached out halfway. That's the best way I can describe it, to African Americans. And African Americans, starting in the 1930s, became a part of Franklin Roosevelt's liberal democratic coalition that used to win elections left and right for the rest of the century. And that is notable because after Roosevelt, you get Harry Truman, who actually wanted greater civil rights in this country. And Harry Truman issued an executive order integrating the U.S. Armed Forces.
Yeah.
And everybody said, oh my God, everything, there's going to be no discipline. Our force is going to be destroyed. Well, you know what? A little time goes by. No, it happened. It was fine. The integration of the armed forces was totally successful. And Keith, you know what comparison I'm making, because people said, oh, if we let gays into the military, there'll be no discipline. Everything will be destroyed. Well, and don't ask, don't tell was this stupid halfway measure.
Yep.
You know, when we finally got it done, the military is fine. There's no, you know, that's another historical parallel.
Well, it's like that, and also with gay marriage. It's like, you know, everybody lost their eyes and minds over the fact that people same-sex marriage.
Next time you guys come back with me, that's a topic I really want to explore, is interracial marriage, because we don't have enough time now to really go into it. No, because there was a time when it was okay in early America to be married interracially, and then the laws came in because ain't nobody allowed to love each other. But
Loving versus Virginia.
I know, and we're going to get more into that. But right now, I want to wrap up, and I want to hear where you think we are headed. There has been a wave of Black support and numbers coming out in record numbers to vote. And we have our Stacey Abrams and so many other strong, particularly Black women. Keith, I'll ask you first. Where do you think we're headed?
Well, I'm hoping that we're heading into the next dynasty of strong Black women hanging on and taking charge, because not for nothing, the greedy white men are making a mockery of this, and we got to get the Beckys and Karens to stop getting upset about stuff so that they can be helpful. And until they all figure themselves out, Black women ain't having it. Thank you, Cori Bush. Thank you, Cori Bush.
All right.
Okay.
Back to you, and Peter, you take it out.
I think history matters, and Keith, we can talk about this in the future, because it's
I want to talk to you about a whole bunch of stuff. I love you.
Well, as a friend.
Oh, gotcha. I mean, I don't want Peaches coming for me. I love me some Peaches.
Peaches left in the other room.
Yeah, Peaches will cut she will cut a bitch. So I'm not playing with that.
She will.
Peaches is Peter Bales' wife, and she's a comedian, and she's a real deal chick. She'll take no crap, but she has the biggest
heart. Latina. You got to say that.
And she is a doll. All right, so where are we going with all of this?
I think we're going in a good direction. But Keith, you and I can discuss this. And Maureen,
thank you for including me in my show. Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Maureen, Keith and I are talking, okay?
Don't make me hate you. Don't make me hate you.
Well, you know, how do we
online?
How do we get there? And I honestly think we need to elect more Democrats of any color. And remember the slogan in the late 60s, "Burn, baby, burn," by the Black Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
Black Panthers were on the right side. Their cause of racial justice was right. Violence and a slogan like that probably actually didn't help progress, but probably slowed up progress.
Yeah, right.
White backlash.
That's right.
Because the expression "defund the police,"
right, it's the
that
same
counterproductive
slogan.
And it's a slogan because it sounds much better than "let's just divert funding to social."
How about help the police? That would be.
Doesn't fit on a poster. Defund the police, but nobody wants to really defund the police. And I think that middle America that might elect Democrats of all stripes who are more sympathetic to civil rights are alienated by slogans like defund the police.
And we'll talk more about that. We're going to have Keith Price, Comedy Daddy, on Twitter and Venmo, joining us in a couple of weeks. We'll have our official historian, Peter Bales, back.
Right.
So much to talk about this in Black History Month. My Rosa Parks Mattel Barbie doll right here. And if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/Maureen Langan. Become a member. You've got delicious, juicy backstage chats with Ophira Eisenberg of NPR's Ask Me Another or Anything, something like that, and Jessica Curson. And pardon me. And next week, Sandra Joseph. She played Christine on Broadway in Phantom of the Opera, longest running leading lady on Broadway in Broadway's longest running show. She holds the record for that. You're going to love her. So, you want to follow this. You want to subscribe for free on Spotify, Apple, follow it on MaureenLangan.com. But if you want to support the show, go to Venmo, PayPal, Mo Langan, but Patreon will really be a really great support if you want to be part of the Hanging with Langan community. And we have fun there. We get wine parties, dish the dirt. We could do a wine party with the two of you. We could do whatever you want. Reach out, tell me what you like, and we'll make the magic happen. We bring you great, great people. And Facebook. Hey, you guys, we can't see your name when you comment on the Hanging with Langan group page. We can see your comments. So make sure that you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, and there'll be a blue bar right there. Just click it. It'll just work anytime it's not just for this show. So anyway, I love you guys. I am most grateful for your support of being on this show. Keith and Peter, I know you're laughing, but I love you. Bring your whiteboard back in Black History Month. Maybe you'll get a blackboard, okay? Maybe you'll do that, Peter Bales. And Keith Price, we'll see you around like a donut, you guys.
I love it.
Okay, and until we meet again, you guys.
Thank you. It was great.